It's the only unsolved airplane hijacking in American history, a riddle that has continued to mystify countless officials while also inspiring amateur sleuths for decades. In this episode, C4 Detective will discuss new evidence, examine competing theories, and review the current leading suspects. And after, we will provide you with our theory on who the most likely culprit is. Stay tuned for another exploration in unsolved crime as we investigate D.B. Cooper. When it comes to American crime history, few stories are as captivating and enigmatic as the D.B. Cooper airplane hijacking. To this day, the case remains unsolved, with new theories arising every year. It all began on a rainy night on November 24, 1971, when a man who identified himself as dancooper boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 from Portland to Seattle. Interestingly, the name D.B. Cooper, which was used to identify this man, was due to an early suspect in this case having that name, which just stuck in the press, as it sounded more mysterious. However, Cooper was never known to use the name D.B. during this incident. Cooper was wearing a black suit and trench coat, along with a black clip-on tie and dark sunglasses. Cooper was seated in a middle seat in the last row of the airplane and ordered a glass of bourbon while the airplane was preparing to leave. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper, appearing calm and collected, handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Schaffner initially ignored the note without looking at it, prompting Cooper to state to her, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Schaffner looked at the note, which stated Cooper had a bomb in his briefcase and wanted her to sit by him. Schaffner returned the note to Cooper and sat down as he requested. Cooper opened his briefcase to show Schaffner the supposed bomb he was carrying. Schaffner later recounted seeing several red cylinders that she believed was dynamite, attached with wires to what appeared to be a cylindrical battery. Cooper demanded a ransom of $200,000 in negotiable American currency and 4 parachutes consisting of 2 back-worn main parachutes and 2 front-worn reserve parachutes. Schaffner then left to inform the pilots of Cooper's requests, and then remained in the cockpit throughout the flight to take notes per the captain's instructions. The pilots radioed in the hijacking and Cooper's demands, mobilizing the authorities in Seattle. The president of Northwest Orient authorized payment of the ransom and ordered all employees to comply with the hijackers' instructions. By asking for more than 1 parachute, it is believed that Cooper may have wanted authorities to believe he intended to take a hostage, reducing the possibility of the parachutes being tampered with, which is exactly why the FBI didn't even consider it. While Schaffner stayed with the pilots, another flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, remained with Cooper, and the 2 flight attendants communicated updates to Cooper's requests via the in-flight communication system. Mucklow would later note that Cooper was friendly with her and remained calm throughout the ordeal, regularly smoking filter-tipped Raleigh cigarettes. However, upon sitting with him, Cooper made several more demands he relayed for Mucklow, to include instructing that after landing in Seattle, a fuel truck was to meet with the plane for fueling while all passengers remained in their seats. During this time, Mucklow would be allowed to leave to retrieve the money and the parachutes from the authorities. As the flight continued, the passengers were told their arrival in Seattle would be delayed because of a minor mechanical difficulty, keeping them in the dark about the hijacking. For approximately 2 hours, Flight 305 circled the Puget Sound to give Seattle police and the FBI sufficient time to assemble Cooper's ransom money and parachutes. During this time, Mucklow continues to sit with Cooper and occasionally speak with him. She later stated that Cooper appeared familiar with the area below outside of the window, even remarking at one point that it looks like Tacoma down there as the aircraft flew over it. He also correctly pointed out that McCord Air Force Base was only a 20-minute drive from Seattle Airport. At one point, Mucklow asked Cooper why he picked Northwest Orient Airlines to hijack. Cooper allegedly laughed and replied, "It's not because I have a grudge against your airline, it's just because I have a grudge. This flight simply suited my needs." Cooper asked where Mucklow was from, to which she answered that she was originally from Pennsylvania, but was living in Minneapolis at the time. Cooper responded that Minnesota was very nice country. Mucklow responded by asking Cooper where he was from, but this question upset him and he refused to answer. Cooper then asked if she smoked and offered Mucklow a cigarette. She replied that she had quit, but accepted the cigarette anyway. The $200,000 ransom was received from Seattle First National Bank. The money consisted of 10,000 unmarked $20 bills in a bag weighing approximately 20 pounds. The FBI had recorded the serial numbers of the bills prior to sending them to the plane for Cooper. Seattle police obtained the 2 front-worn reserve parachutes from a local skydiving school and the 2 back-worn main parachutes from a local stunt pilot. At approximately 5:46 p.m., Flight 305 landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport after the captain being informed the parachutes and money had been delivered. With Cooper's permission, the captain parked the aircraft away from the main terminal. Cooper demanded that the fuel trucks be positioned in such a way as he could keep an eye on them. Cooper also stated that he only wanted one representative of the airline to approach the plane with the parachutes and money, and that the only entrance and exit would be through the aircraft's front door via the mobile stairs. Per Cooper's instructions, the passengers remained seated as a ground crew attached the mobile staircase and Mucklow exited the aircraft to retrieve the ransom money. When she returned, Mucklow carried the money bag past the seated passengers to Cooper in the last row, making multiple trips in this manner, with the final trip being to retrieve the parachutes. When Mucklow brought the final parachute to Cooper, she gave him printed instructions for using the parachutes, but Cooper said he didn't need them. At this point, Cooper agreed to release the passengers. As they disembarked, Cooper inspected the money. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Mucklow jokingly asked Cooper if she could have some of the money, to which Cooper readily agreed, and handed her a packet of bills. However, Mucklow immediately returned the money and explained accepting gratuities was against company policy. She said Cooper had tried to tip her and the other 2 flight attendants earlier in the flight with money from his own pocket, but they had each declined, citing the policy. With the passengers safely off the plane, only Cooper and 6 crew members remained on board. A problem with the refueling process caused a delay, so a second truck and then a third were brought to the aircraft to complete the refueling. During this delay, Mucklow said Cooper complained the money was delivered in a cloth bag instead of a knapsack as he had directed, and he now had to improvise a new way to transport the money. Using a pocket knife, Cooper cut the canopy from one of the reserve parachutes and stuffed some of the money into the empty parachute bag. It was later revealed that Mucklow may have witnessed Cooper also stuffing some of the money into his clothes. Eventually, Cooper became impatient during the refueling and stated, "This shouldn't take so long. Let's get this show on the road." He then gave the cockpit crew his flight plan, which consisted of a southeast course toward Mexico City at the minimum airspeed possible without stalling, which would be approximately 115 miles per hour. Cooper also directed the plane fly below 10,000 feet in altitude. The landing gear remained deployed, the wing flaps lowered to 15 degrees, and the cabin remained unpressurized. Upon receiving these directions, the first officer informed Cooper that this configuration limited the aircraft's range to about 1,000 miles, so a second refueling would be necessary before entering Mexico. Cooper and the crew discussed options, and Cooper agreed on Reno, Nevada as a refueling stop. Cooper further directed the aircraft take off with the rear exit door open and its air stair extended. Northwest's home office objected that this was unsafe, to which Cooper stated, "It can be done, do it," but did not further argue the point and said he would just lower the staircase himself once they were airborne. It was at this point that Cooper demanded Mucklow remain aboard to assist him with the operation. At approximately 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off again. 2 F-106 jet fighters from McCord Air Force Base and a Lockheed T-33 Air National Guard jet followed the 727. All 3 follow jets needed to maintain an S flight pattern in order to stay behind the slow-moving 727 and out of Cooper's view. Due to this, the 727 was apparently rarely in view of the jet pilots. After takeoff in Seattle, Cooper told Mucklow to lower the rear staircase. Mucklow stated that she feared being sucked out of the aircraft. The crew suggested she come to the cockpit to retrieve a rope with which she could tie herself to a seat. Cooper rejected the suggestion, stating he did not want her going up front or the flight crew coming back to the cabin. Mucklow again expressed her concern and asked him to cut some cord from one of the parachutes to create a safety line for her. Cooper then stated that he would lower the stairs himself, instructing her to go to the cockpit and to close the curtain partition between the coach and first-class sections. Before leaving, Mucklow pleaded with Cooper to take the bomb with him. Cooper responded that he would either disarm it or take it with him. As Mucklow turned to close the curtain partition, she saw Cooper standing in the aisle tying what appeared to be the money bag around his waist. This was the last anyone had seen Cooper. By the time Mucklow arrived in the cockpit, Flight 305 had been back in the air for approximately 5 minutes. At approximately 8 p.m., a cockpit warning light flashed, indicating the aft staircase had been deployed. One of the pilots used the cabin intercom to ask Cooper if he needed assistance, but Cooper simply stated, "No." This was the last time anyone heard Cooper speak. At approximately 8:13 p.m., while flying over an area near the suburbs north of Portland, the aircraft's tail section suddenly pitched upward, forcing the pilots to trim and level the aircraft out. At 11:02 p.m., with the aft staircase still deployed, Flight 305 landed at Reno Tahoe International Airport. FBI agents, state troopers, sheriff's deputies, and Reno police established a perimeter around the aircraft, eventually clearing and entering the aircraft. But Cooper, the bomb, and the money were nowhere to be found. The investigation began immediately. While investigators combed through the 727, others spoke to the witnesses in order to get a description of Cooper. An initial sketch was made and sent out publicly with the hopes that someone might recognize him. He was described as a white male in his mid-40s, around 5 feet 10 inches in height, approximately 170 pounds, dark hair, and some witnesses even stated he may have had slightly darker skin or olive complexion. On the aircraft, FBI agents collected several pieces of physical evidence including 66 latent fingerprints, Cooper's black clip-on tie with tie clip, and 2 of the 4 parachutes. One of the parachutes had been opened and had shroud lines cut from the canopy. Additionally, it was later learned that one of the reserve parachutes provided to Cooper was mistakenly a dummy training parachute, and that this dummy chute was not one of the 2 left behind on the plane, meaning one of the parachutes Cooper took with him was this non-functional dummy chute. Authorities attempted to locate the potential drop zone of Cooper. It is commonly believed that the pitch felt by the pilots at 8:13 p.m. was due to Cooper jumping out of the rear of the plane at that time, a theory later reinforced by tests conducted in 727s, proving someone jumping from the aft staircase in flight would reproduce this effect. However, even with the time of the jump known, precisely defining the search area was difficult. The plane's airspeed, altitude, and environmental conditions along the route varied, and there was no way of knowing how long Cooper was in free fall before pulling his ripcord. The chase jets following Flight 305 never saw anyone jumping from the plane. However, a dark-clothed individual jumping out of a plane at night would be difficult to see even under ideal circumstances. This night was moonless and allegedly had significant cloud cover. There is also some indication based on recent work done by Cooper researcher Eric Hewless, including gathering information from air traffic controllers, that Flight 305 may have deviated significantly from its perceived flight path even though its autopilot was allegedly engaged. Despite all this, and many believing that Cooper died in the crash, which is the current FBI theory, authorities still launched a massive manhunt. Teams of FBI agents, military service members, and civilian volunteers searched in and around the believed drop zone, with no evidence of Cooper or the money ever confirmed to be found. That is, until February 7, 1980, when a 9-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was with his family along the Columbia River. Ingram was digging in the sand and found 3 bundles of cash and $20 bills totaling $5,800 that matched serial numbers from the ransom money. The money was discovered along the river on Tina Bar just outside Vancouver, Washington. The FBI brought in a team of agents to comb the beach looking for the rest of the cash, but only small fragments were found. Research at the time revealed that in 1974, over 2 years after the hijacking, a dredging operation dumped several tons of sand onto Tina Bar, indicating the money may have been deposited several years after the hijacking due to it being discovered above the dredged layer. This would answer why, even though the bills were extremely damaged, the rubber bands holding the bills together were relatively intact, something deemed to be impossible given the time passed and environmental conditions present. Along with this, the money was found upriver from where the supposed drop zone was, indicating that either the drop zone was drastically incorrect, or that someone later buried the money there long after the hijacking. However, recent work conducted by the FBI and scientist Tom Kay indicates that the initial determination of the dredging location was incorrect, and that the money found was actually deposited mere months after the hijacking, likely ending up there naturally by being transported via the bank bag being pulled upriver by a ship, before the bag broke up near the shore, increasing the odds that 3 bundles would have been found together. In this theory, the rest of the money would have likely been destroyed by a ship propeller and other environmental conditions. In fact, based on the equipment Cooper had with him to secure the money, tests have demonstrated that his ability to secure the money during the jump would have been difficult if not impossible, and that in all likelihood Cooper would not have been able to keep the money secured to himself while in free fall, with the possible exception of any bills he may have secured deep within his clothing. Case theory fits within the FBI's suspected drop zone as well, as does a 2019 report released by the FBI showing that 3 hours after Cooper jumped, a burglary occurred at a small grocery store near Hyson, Washington, an unincorporated community located within the calculated drop zone. The burglar took only survival items such as beef jerky and gloves, which lends suspicion that it may have been Cooper, despite the FBI today still indicating they believe Cooper likely died. Whatever people believe, it is clear that the initial thoughts of when and where Cooper and the money ended up were at least partially incorrect. Knowing all of this, the suspect pool is enormous. C4 Detective has reviewed dozens of popular suspects. However, most present no direct evidence linking them to the infamous hijacking. In the interest of time, we will avoid going over suspects that only might bear a resemblance to one of the Cooper sketches, or that merely confessed to being Cooper with no other substantiating information, as those suspects number in the hundreds. While some of these suspects do represent valid circumstantial evidence, when their activities are analyzed on the day of the hijacking, most are easily dismissed. So instead, we will only go over who we believe the top 3 of the publicly known suspects are. These suspects all present more than one factor that make them strong candidates, and they also had both motive and opportunity. To that, the following 3 suspects meet the criteria we at C4 Detective have created for Cooper, which closely matches the FBI profile. First, we believe Cooper was a white male adult with a shaded or olive complexion, or that he was wearing some sort of makeup to mask his true skin color. We believe Cooper had military experience and likely was a qualified paratrooper, due to his preference of a military-style parachute and comfort with jumping out of an airplane, but lacking in more in-depth skydiving knowledge, which is common for a basic military paratrooper unless they have received military free-fall training. Cooper may have even had some explosive or demolition experience, due to the fact that even if the bomb was a fake, someone with this experience could create a realistic-looking fake. We believe Cooper knew the area around Washington or Oregon where the plane flew, either because he lived or was stationed there, or Cooper conducted a recon of the area prior to the hijacking. Finally, we believe Cooper likely had a criminal record of some type given his comfort with which he conducted the crime. That all said, the first suspect we will present is one of the most popular due to a recent documentary identifying him as Cooper, Robert Rackstraw. This theory, notably put forth by film producer and amateur investigator Thomas Colbert, has a lot going for it. Colbert's theory suggests that Rackstraw, a former Army paratrooper and Vietnam War veteran, orchestrated the hijacking. The linchpin in this theory is the discovery of the decaying ransom money at Tina Bar along the Columbia River. According to Colbert, Rackstraw's connection to the discovery is hinted at by the money's proximity to his alleged residence, suggesting Rackstraw provided it to a criminal associate of his who then gave it to the Ingram family to discover it at Tina Bar. Additionally, Colbert's team allegedly deciphered a hidden code from letters sent to the authorities after the hijacking that point to Rackstraw. Rackstraw clearly had the capability being an experienced paratrooper and pilot, while also possibly having knowledge of the 727's capability of parachuting from the rear stairs in flight, as this was something done by the CIA, whom Rackstraw may have worked with in Vietnam. Rackstraw also had apparent motive as he was kicked out of the military shortly before the hijacking. However, like most Cooper suspects, this is all circumstantial at best. The FBI could not find a DNA match of Rackstraw with the DNA left on the tie, nor did Rackstraw's fingerprints match any recovered in the plane. Mucklow has also specifically stated that Rackstraw was not Cooper, which makes sense considering Rackstraw was in his late 20s at the time of the hijacking, even appearing as so based on photographs of him, which clearly does not match witnesses stating Cooper was likely in his 40s. Additionally, the idea that Rackstraw gave part of the ransom money away to deliberately plant, in order to confuse the FBI, falls apart due to the fact there are several reports of the FBI and others finding smaller pieces of money along the Columbia River that very likely belonged to the ransom money as well. If the money found was planted, where did these other pieces come from? As for the secret messages being deciphered, we at C4 Detective don't dispute the codebreaker's expertise. However, when we reviewed what was available of the alleged secret codes that point to Rackstraw, we found that it was necessary to rely on specific keys picked by the codebreaker in order for the code to work. Different messages can be derived using this method that don't point to Rackstraw at all. It's our opinion that there was a bias in play when the messages were deciphered, using known facts about Rackstraw in order to make it look as though there were hidden messages about him. It should also be noted that none of these notes sent have ever been proven to have actually come from Cooper. The next suspect is Dwayne Weber, an insurance salesman living in Florida with his wife in the 90s. Unlike the other suspects we will discuss, Weber was the right age at the time of the hijacking according to witness statements. In 1995, while on his deathbed dying of kidney disease, Weber called his wife to his bed and told her he needed to confess something. Weber told her, "I am Dan Cooper." Weber's wife didn't understand the confession at the time. What's more interesting is the fact that Weber confessed to being Dan Cooper, the real alias used by the hijacker, as opposed to D.B. Cooper, which is what the hijacker was most publicly known as, especially in 1995. Further, while many people have claimed to be Cooper over the years, with many dismissing Weber's confession as hearsay, someone confessing something when they know they are about to die is one of the few instances that hearsay can be presented legally in court, and it is known as a dying declaration. Further research by Weber's wife after he passed revealed to her he was referring to the infamous hijacker, and she then remembered several interesting clues that occurred throughout their 17-year marriage, which reinforced his confession. Those clues included a trip they took together to the Columbia River in Seattle in 1979, where she remembered him throwing a trash bag upstream of Tina Bar, along with seeing her husband disappear for several hours before returning dirty as if he'd been digging. She even claimed he showed her an area once, stating that's where D.B. Cooper walked out of the woods. She also stated she remembered him talking in his sleep about leaving his fingerprints on a plane. And at one point in their marriage, he claimed that an old knee injury was the result of him jumping out of a plane. Weber does bear a resemblance to the more accepted Cooper sketch, and was an alleged chain smoker and drinker. Additionally, Weber had both a military and criminal background. While Weber did have a military background, there was no record of him ever being a paratrooper or receiving airborne training. There is also no record showing he was anywhere near the Oregon or Washington area before, during, or after the hijacking in 1971. Witnesses have also discounted him as being Cooper, and no fingerprints or DNA recovered have matched Weber's. Ultimately, the entire theory on Weber being Cooper is based solely upon his wife's claims and nothing else. What Weber was known to be is a con man and often lied for various purposes. Even if what Weber's wife said is true, it is highly possible he was lying to his wife right before his death or trying to glorify himself in some role, as he was clearly fascinated with the Cooper hijacking. While Weber is still a strong suspect worthy of our top 3, we find him to be the weakest of them. Our final suspect is Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. Unlike every other leading Cooper suspect, McCoy is the only one to have been known to pull off a similar hijacking. A few months after the Cooper hijack, Floyd boarded United Airlines Flight 855 under the alias James Johnson during a stopover in Denver, Colorado. Shortly after takeoff, McCoy handed a flight attendant a note demanding $500,000 in cash ransom, 4 parachutes, and the return of all written or typed directions given during the course of the flight. McCoy had a pistol and decoy grenade with him used to carry out the crime. The aircraft was a Boeing 727 with aft stairs, the same type of plane associated with the Cooper hijacking. McCoy received the ransom and parachutes he requested after the plane landed in San Francisco, after which the plane took off again. McCoy escaped in mid-flight by a parachute he brought with him instead of using one of the parachutes he requested. Like Rackstraw, McCoy was a former Army paratrooper and pilot with Special Forces training. McCoy also likely conducted operations with the CIA in Vietnam, therefore he also likely knew about the 727's capabilities. Because of his almost identical hijacking, McCoy is an obvious leading Cooper suspect, despite the FBI only declaring him a copycat. The fact is, motive is not in question with McCoy, nor is his ability to carry out such a brazen criminal act, because he conducted an almost identical one. The theory of McCoy being Cooper is not without problems. McCoy was arrested for hijacking Flight 855 after a friend of his tipped off authorities. McCoy later escaped from prison in 1974 and was killed in a shootout with the FBI not long after. The FBI has discounted him as a Cooper suspect due to an apparent alibi putting him in Las Vegas the night of the Cooper hijacking, and with his family at Thanksgiving in Utah the next day. Further, the friend who tipped off law enforcement told the FBI McCoy stated he read about D.B. Cooper in the paper and claimed he could pull off a similar hijacking. but would have asked for $500,000, further indicating to the FBI that he was just a copycat. The FBI also stated that although similar, there were clear differences between the McCoy and Cooper crimes. And like Rackstraw, McCoy would have been far younger than what witnesses reported of Cooper, being only 28 at the time of the Cooper hijacking. So who was Dan Cooper? While we won't say definitively due to the lack of evidence publicly available, our pick is Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. We came to this conclusion based on the facts we previously laid out. However, we first looked into the leading FBI theory that Cooper died in the jump. While this theory is plausible, there are some problems with it. First, there was never any bodies found in the years following the Cooper hijacking anywhere that would match the description. The FBI would say correctly that Cooper may have ended up in a river where his body decomposed or was destroyed in a ship propeller, or that his body was consumed by animals, which would be possible given the likely area of the drop zone. However, C4 detective examined the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, as well as several other databases looking for missing persons across the US and Canada, using a broad age range in the year prior and several years after the hijacking, and found no correlation that could have possibly been Cooper. We find it unlikely there wouldn't be at least one family member or friend who wouldn't have reported someone as missing at some point if Cooper had perished during the escape. We also know that carrying out such a jump is highly possible given the successful copycat hijackings like McCoy's. When examining cold cases, it's important to not only be objective, but to stick to the theory we have brought up before on this channel, Occam's razor. That being the simplest solution is the most likely one. When it comes to unsolved cases, it's common for people to get wrapped up in clues that may seem like connections in the case, but that are usually not related. An example of this in the Cooper case is particles of titanium and other unusual alloys recently found on Cooper's tie. Those particles may have found their way onto the tie in any number of ways, especially considering we don't know where Cooper got it or how long he had it. There is no way to conclude that this has anything to do with Cooper himself, and therefore, we shouldn't assume it does. The reality is, when cold cases are solved, it's more common that the correct suspect is the most likely one, many times initially being discounted because of one or two eliminating facts, or because people believe that it would just be too obvious. The truth is that the number one problem with crime is criminal recidivism, meaning that someone who has already committed similar acts before or after would be the leading suspect. That said, Dwayne Weber has a criminal background, fits the age and general look of Cooper, and allegedly confessed to being Cooper just days before his death. However, there is no other connection to the Cooper case. He was a known con man, and even if he actually confessed to his wife, her other statements about his associations with the Cooper hijacking also follow, with him merely being interested in the crime itself, something millions of other people are as well. Robert Rackstraw is also a good candidate, had the appropriate training and background, and had a possible motive. However, Rackstraw was not only too young based on the witness statements, he also appeared very young as well, and neither Rackstraw or Weber have a record that showed they would be willing to pull off such an act, nor is there any indication either of them were in the Washington or Oregon area before or during the Cooper hijacking. Then there is Richard McCoy. Without question, McCoy is the only suspect that had the training, experience, and absolute known willingness to conduct such a hijacking and subsequent escape, as he definitively did so 5 months later. His alibi of being in Vegas the night of the Cooper hijacking and at Thanksgiving with his family in Utah the day after has been recently questioned as well, due in part to the work conducted by amateur investigator Dan Grider. Grider learned from McCoy's sister-in-law that McCoy in fact was not present at Thanksgiving with his family, and that she remembered him taking a trip with his wife while she babysitted for their kids that day. This has also been confirmed by McCoy's children. This indicates that McCoy's family lied to the FBI to provide him with an alibi. Further, there is some indication that McCoy being in Vegas the night of the hijacking may only be based on some receipts obtained. While we think it's entirely possible that McCoy may have made it to Vegas after the jump if he had help, and that it would provide an ideal place to launder any money he may have been able to secure from the Cooper hijack, it would also be rather easy to have someone use his identity to make purchases in Las Vegas to provide him with an alibi. Additionally, given the fact that Cooper likely lost most if not all of the money during his escape, this would have enticed him to conduct another hijacking, especially considering he got away with it the first time. A second hijacking almost identical to the first but with some minor changes in his MO to correct the mistakes, as is seen with the McCoy hijacking. Others discount McCoy because, like Rackstraw, he would have been too young at the time of the hijacking to have been Cooper, who was reported by witnesses to have likely been in his 40s. However, when looking at photographs of McCoy at the time of the Cooper hijacking, he clearly appears much older than he actually is, while also bearing a strong resemblance to the Cooper sketches. We also know from his own crime that McCoy may likely have worn makeup to further disguise his appearance, which would account for some witnesses claiming Cooper had an olive or tan complexion. It has also been pointed out that McCoy did not smoke cigarettes, but smoking in an attempt to divert suspicion despite him not being known as a smoker is also in line with McCoy's behavioral profile. Indeed, there are accounts of a witness identifying McCoy as potentially being Cooper, a man who was unaware of the hijacking at the time, which may make him a better eyewitness than Mucklow or Schaffner due to the fact that they were under a great deal of stress due to being aware of the hijacking, which has been known to cause severe inaccuracies in witness accounts on other cases. In addition to all this, there are unconfirmed reports that McCoy took trips to both Portland and Las Vegas just prior to the Cooper hijacking, something that the real Cooper would likely have done in order to properly recon the area and plan the crime. While McCoy never admitted to being Dan Cooper, he never denied it either. His conversation with a friend that led to his arrest for the second hijacking could very well have been a method he used in an attempt to throw off suspicion of anyone thinking he was Cooper. The differences in the Cooper hijacking with the later one known to have been accomplished by McCoy were all changes that are easily seen as learning from the mistakes seemingly made during the first attempt, such as bringing his own parachute and secure bag so he didn't lose a significant portion of the money this time around. The tie clip left by Cooper was also identified by McCoy's family as being his, and has been identified by others as being worn by students of Brigham Young University, where McCoy had been a student. However, with this being the case, why has the FBI been so insistent that McCoy was merely a copycat? Dan Grider has also uncovered facts indicating the FBI at the time may have been trying to avoid embarrassment by further investigating McCoy. In addition to killing McCoy, the FBI conducted a warrantless search of his residence leading to his arrest that very well could have gotten his case thrown out of court on a Fourth Amendment violation. It is possible the FBI just wanted to close the book on McCoy altogether, avoiding any more speculation that he may have been Cooper. In fact, many retired FBI agents and other law enforcement officials believe McCoy was Cooper, but have not been able to get them to further investigate him for the Cooper hijacking. Many of these possibilities are detailed in the book, The Real McCoy, which first posited that McCoy was actually Cooper. Although not confirmed, C4 detective could find no publicly available reports that McCoy's DNA and fingerprints were ever tested against what the FBI collected. Although it should be noted that the DNA found on Cooper's tie was only a partial profile, and that there is no way of knowing that the DNA or the fingerprints collected even belonged to Cooper. Additionally, the FBI lost the cigarette butts collected at the scene which Cooper had smoked, and also failed to locate the bourbon glass he drank from, or any of the magazines Cooper was reported to have read while in flight. These investigative failures further reinforce the idea that the FBI wasn't exactly conducting their best work with regards to the Cooper case. All in all, there have been hundreds of suspects that people have claimed was Cooper over the years, to include other popular candidates such as Walter Recca, Joe Lakich, Kenneth Christensen, William J. Smith, Barbara Dayton, and Lyndon Doyle Cooper. C4 detective does not believe any of these other suspects could have been Cooper, as in addition to having no direct ties to the Cooper hijacking, there is reasonable information or exculpatory evidence to exclude them all. That said, we aren't saying McCoy is definitely Cooper. What we're saying is that out of the currently known suspects, he is clearly the best candidate to be Dan Cooper, something McCoy's own children also believe without question. Thanks for watching. Would it surprise you to learn that over 90% of those watching our videos are not subscribed to our channel? Please help us build our small channel and be a part of our investigative team by clicking that subscribe and like button. It really helps us out while allowing us to keep bringing you investigation videos. Have a suggestion or evidence you want to provide to us? Contact us and let us know. Until the next investigation, stay curious.